On a trail camera set in a strip of woodland behind a row of houses somewhere in the American Northeast, an animal walks across the frame at night. At a glance, it looks like a coyote, and for years that is what almost everyone called it. But something about it does not fit the label. It is too large and too heavily built for the coyotes of the western plains, with a broader head and a thicker frame. It does not slink through the edges the way a nervous coyote does. It moves through the human landscape with an ease that looks almost proprietary, as if the backyards and the ball fields and the cemetery down the road belong to it. It is not a wolf. It is not quite a coyote either. It is something the field guides did not originally have a clean name for because it did not fully exist when most of them were written. The remarkable part is how completely this animal has taken over without most people noticing what it is. Over the last several decades, it has spread across the entire Northeast, from rural New England down through the Mid-Atlantic, and it has moved directly into the cities. It dens in urban parks and old cemeteries and the untended margins of airports and golf courses. It has established breeding populations in every borough of New York City, hunting rats and geese and deer within sight of the skyline, largely nocturnal, largely unseen. It did not arrive as a rare stray wandering in from the wilderness. It arrived as a settled, reproducing resident that had been quietly assembling itself for a century and was simply waiting for people to look closely enough to ask what it was. The animal is the eastern coyote. In popular usage, it has picked up a more dramatic and more contested nickname, the Coywolf, and the argument packed into that single word is the whole story. Because when biologists sequenced its genome, they did not find a coyote. They found a blend. In one large analysis of hundreds of these animals, the average eastern coyote turned out to be roughly 2/3 western coyote, about a quarter wolf, split between gray wolf and the eastern wolf, and around a 10th domestic dog. 3 separate species braided into one animal. The researcher who described it called the result a kind of canned soup. And that reframes the creature on the trail camera entirely. The question is not whether coyotes have moved into eastern cities. They obviously have. The question is what this specific animal actually is, given that it is not fully any one of the 3 species that went into making it. The answer rests on 4 things. The first is an absence. For this animal to exist, something else had to be removed, and that something was the wolf. Across the 19th and into the 20th century, wolves were systematically exterminated from the eastern United States, shot, trapped, and poisoned until the top of the food chain was simply empty. That vacancy is the precondition for everything that followed. An ecosystem does not leave a predator-shaped hole open forever. The deer multiply, the smaller carnivores shift, and the space at the top waits for something to fill it. The wolf was gone, and nothing native was positioned to take its place. The door was standing open. The second is the assembly, and it happened in motion. As wolves vanished, the western coyote, an adaptable animal that had always lived out on the plains, began pushing eastward in the early decades of the 20th century, following the cleared and altered landscape into new territory. But the coyotes moving east did not travel through empty country. In the Great Lakes region and southern Canada, they passed through the last strongholds of remnant wolves, and the 2 interbred. Later, along the way, some dog ancestry entered the mix as well. The animal that emerged from that corridor was not the coyote that had set out. It was a hybrid carrying wolf and dog genes layered onto a coyote foundation, and it kept moving, sweeping across the Northeast over the following decades. This creature was not a species that migrated into the region intact. It was, in a real sense, manufactured in transit, built out of 3 animals during the journey east. The third element is why the blend worked so well, because the mixture was not random noise. It was, almost accidentally, an upgrade tuned for exactly the landscape it was entering. The wolf genes gave the eastern coyote a larger body, a more powerful build, and stronger jaws. Enough that unlike its smaller western relative, it can bring down adult deer and cooperate in family groups to do it. That matters enormously in an East Coast overrun with deer and short on large predators. The dog ancestry, meanwhile, may have contributed traits suited to living alongside humans, including tolerances and timing that make dense, people-filled environments less of a barrier. The result is an animal assembled by pure chance into something close to the ideal predator for a fragmented, suburban, deer-rich, human-dominated Northeast. It is big enough to hunt the abundant prey, adaptable enough to eat almost anything, and comfortable enough near people to live in the middle of a city. If this is the kind of case worth following to the part where the scientists themselves cannot agree, subscribe. What comes next is where the animal defeats the last assumption standing against it, and then the argument over what to even call it, including the sensational number about this creature that is simply backwards. The fourth element is the barrier that turned out not to be one, which is the city itself. The intuition is that a wild predator large enough to kill a deer could not possibly live inside a dense metropolitan area full of traffic, buildings, and millions of people. The eastern coyote has quietly demolished that assumption. It threads through the urban landscape at night, using parks, rail corridors, cemeteries, and green strips as habitat and travel routes, denning and raising pups within a short distance of dense neighborhoods, and most residents never know it is there. Far from keeping it out, the city offers abundant food, few competitors, and cover in plain sight. The animal that filled the empty wolf niche in the forest turned out to be equally capable of filling it in the concrete one, which is precisely why it now sits, unofficially, as a genuine apex predator of the American urban Northeast. Researchers who track these urban animals have documented them raising litters in city cemeteries, crossing the bridges between boroughs, and moving along active rail corridors in the dark, timing their travel around the rhythms of human traffic. A coyote photographed in a city park is not, as a rule, a lost individual that took a wrong turn out of the countryside. It is a resident, part of an established local population that was born in the city, hunts the city, and raises the next generation there. The wilderness did not send an ambassador into town. The city grew its own top predator. The skeptic's objection here is not only fair, it is largely endorsed by the scientific community, and it deserves to be stated at full strength. Many biologists actively dislike the word coywolf because it dramatically overstates the wolf. This animal is not a wolf with a little coyote in it. It is mostly a coyote with a meaningful minority of wolf and a smaller trace of dog, and the responsible name for it is simply the eastern coyote. The popular image of a fearsome wolf hybrid stalking the suburbs is a distortion of an animal that is, genetically, closer to the coyote than to anything else. And that objection connects directly to the claim that has to be corrected, because it circulates constantly and it is reversed. The eastern coyote is often described as being around 2/3 wolf, a creature mostly descended from wolves. That is the numbers turned inside out. The wolf share is roughly a quarter, not 2/3. The coyote share is the 2/3. Getting that backwards transforms a mostly coyote hybrid into an imaginary wolf monster, and the real animal is remarkable enough without the inversion. Nor is there scientific consensus that this is a brand new species. Some researchers have proposed formally recognizing it as its own distinct type, even suggesting a separate name for it, while others argue it is simply an admixed coyote population, and nothing that warrants a new species at all. That debate is genuinely unsettled, so the creature on the trail camera remains, in the most literal sense, undefined. It is a predator that did not exist in its current form a century and a half ago, assembled from 3 species during a continental expansion, filling a niche that people emptied by destroying the wolf, and now thriving in the woods and parks and cemeteries of nearly every city in the Northeast. Whether it is the early stage of a new species still taking shape, or simply a successful hybrid that will keep blurring the line between coyote and wolf indefinitely, is not something science has resolved, because the animal is still changing and still spreading while the argument continues. What is not in dispute is the trajectory. The eastern coyote keeps pushing its range outward, keeps breeding, and keeps folding in new genetic material wherever coyote, wolf, and dog populations happen to overlap, which means the thing being argued over is not a fixed specimen sitting still to be classified. It is a moving target, a work in progress, an evolutionary event unfolding fast enough to outrun the paperwork meant to describe it. It is out there tonight in the dark green margin behind the houses, doing the job the wolf used to do in a body the wolf never had, waiting on a name the experts cannot agree to give it.